I met John through Deborah, and I met Deborah from working on a little tiny low-budget feature that was so terrible it was never even released. But Deborah was the script supervisor on it, and Dean Cundy and Ray Stella were camera crew on it. And so when Deborah then got together with John and wrote and produced Halloween, she remembered the people she had worked with, who she liked working with, and called us to work on Halloween. And so that was the beginning of the association with John and Deborah. There are three things you need to be successful in the movie business. You have to have the skills, you have to know the people who are making projects, and you have to have the kind of personality you can bear to be with for 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day. And Deborah had an incredible knack for finding wonderful crew members. And they became part of a family with John and Deborah, and went from film to film with them. And so many people got their start in the business because they came to Deborah and they said, I want to work on a movie. And she'd say, well, what would you like to do? And she'd give them a job doing that. Up until Escape from New York, John and Deborah had only made little independent films. And they knew that they wanted to go professional, that they wanted to start shooting union movies with union crews. And they wanted to bring all of the people they had worked with into the unions with them. And at that time, there was a catch-22. You couldn't work on a union film unless you were in the union. But you couldn't get into the union unless you had worked 30 days on a union film. So Deborah found a way around that. She signed contracts with everyone who she wanted to have work on Escape from New York. And then she signed her union contracts. So they had to honor the previous contracts that were legal contracts. So that way she got me on the show, she got Dean and Ray, and a whole lot of people who they had worked with on the previous films. We were all committed to work on this film, and once we'd get our 30 days, then we would all be able to join the union. So it was a big step for all of us. Most of the film was shot here in Southern California. There was a scene that was shot in the USC library with a full oil derrick going. There was, we managed to duplicate Central Park by using the Sepulveda Dam, and James Cameron painted the skyline of New York on glass, and the camera shot through the glass with it lined up with the horizon in order to create Central Park, which was terrific, except that they had forgotten that when the helicopters came in and dropped the packages to the prisoners in the park, that they would fall behind the skyline. Indian Dunes was a very popular location for films because you can, construct things out there. And they duplicated the inside of Chock full of Nuts there, which is where we had another small incident where they had, there was a hole cut in the floor where inmates are going to come up through it at the end of the scene, and they had it covered over, but the assistant cameraman forgot that it was there, and when he had to go in to do the sticks, he fell right through on top of Barry Bernardi, who was dressed as one of the inmates. But no one was injured. They just set it up again. Whenever something went wrong on the show, everyone would do what you do when an airplane crashes into the ocean. You cover your nose and you grab your balls because we're going down. No one ever raised their voice, no one ever was visibly upset, but whenever something went wrong, they would assume the position. And so right after the problem with the packages falling behind the skyline in Central Park, John himself assumed the position. There's a scene at the Wiltern Theater that we shot that has a drag chorus line. And Nick Castle did the choreography for them because his parents were famous dancers and choreographers, back in the 40s. And the crew played the part of the orchestra. Dean Cundy played the saxophone, Clyde Bryan played a trumpet, Barry Bernardi played a makeshift violin, John played kazoo and guitar. Everyone participated in it. And originally they used the song Everything's Coming Up Roses, and then they found out they couldn't get the rights to it, and so they had to write a new song that would have the same tempo that they could fill in. We shot at very low light levels, and there were many times when I couldn't be sure that I got the shot or not. There were circumstances where there was no way to take a light reading, as in the picture with Donald Pleasance up on the bridge shooting the machine gun, or Kurt inside the glider, where he was lit by one tiny little red light, where I was shooting at about 1/30th of a second with my camera wide open and holding my breath and hoping that I wouldn't have just a blur. And then I'd have to wait a couple of days for the proof sheets to come back to see if I got it or not, which was always a thrill when things would turn out. But those are two of my favorite photos from the shoot. I had John and Dean Cundy, the director of photography, pretty well trained that if nothing was going on, that if they would point, at least it would give me a picture. It was better than people just standing there. So there's one shot of the two of them on the camera dolly, and they spontaneously both pointed in opposite directions. That's one of my favorites. Shooting on sets is not easier today than it was. When I was shooting for John, I was the only photographer on the set. And so there was complete control over the artwork, over what was going out to the public, and it was always of a very high quality. Now, every single person on the set has a cell phone that is capable of taking pictures. And there's very little set security. A lot of people are shooting and immediately uploading things to the internet, and so the internet is being flooded with really bad pictures that don't necessarily represent the film. And also I think actors have a tendency to lose patience when they've been photographed by every single person on the set when it comes time to be photographed by the person who should be photographing them. I think that's a major problem. We held the wrap party a day before we were finished shooting. The wrap party was on a Saturday night, and we still had one day left to shoot on Monday. And the party was held at a roller skating rink in Hollywood. And Dick Warlock, our stunt guy, and Kurt's double, showed me how to skate so that I was doing fairly well. I was managing to get around the rink. But there were people present who were not part of the crew, who knew that there was a Hollywood film crew there and wanted to show off. And a very large guy, probably 6'4" and 300 pounds, went swirling across the rink and slammed into me from behind. And I went flying through the air and landed on my wrist and broke all 3 bones in my wrist. And Deborah Hill took me to the hospital and stayed with me all night long while they set my wrist. And I'm convinced that that's where she got the idea for Halloween too, although John would probably disagree. And, but I still needed to shoot on Monday to get my 30th day in order to get into the Union. So we shot down in San Pedro. It was an escape scene with a raft and a helicopter. And people were very concerned because I was in a cast and taking pain pills. And they kept saying, oh, we don't need this shot, we're fine, sit, be safe. And I was saying, no, I can do it. It's the photographer's machismo at work. So I shot on my 30th day and I got into the Union. And it was tremendous for everybody on the crew who got in. It was really the beginning of our professional careers. It's very gratifying to see the fan reaction to the photos from the films. I always saw my job as being the set historian, and to see that being appreciated now is wonderful. I think producers who think they don't need a still photographer on the set because everybody has a camera are making a huge mistake, because to have someone there who is the dedicated historian for the film is incredibly important. And you wouldn't have any of the behind-the-scenes history preserved if you didn't have a person dedicated to doing that. So now that I'm retired, I felt it was time to go back and put together the things that I knew people would love to see of what it was like to work on these productions, what it was like to work on Escape from New York and Halloween and John's other early films. And so that's when I put my book together. That's my book. And it was such a joy putting it together, to get together with people I hadn't seen in 30 years and to talk about their memories and their experiences on these films, and to see how far they've come. So many people got their start on these films and have become huge successes as producers, as directors, as actors. And it's been very gratifying to see the fan reaction.